So all of this said, it is now with the greatest pleasure that I can introduce the first keynote presentation of this conference. Yeah, please welcome on stage Professor Kenneth J. Gergen.
Thank you so much. It's very humbling to be here. And after all those good words, there's nothing I can say that's going to possibly match them. I don't feel as if anything I say issues from here, from my head. If I have anything to say that's interesting, it's already reflecting conversations in which I've been involved with many people in this room. I simply carry those voices, move with them, try to locate themes and variations that are interesting, put them together, marshal them, put them back into the conversation. So probably anything I have to say that's interesting, in some way you already are there. Some way it already picks up something, some conversation in which you've already been engaged. In any case, it's very humbling and probably inappropriate to give this award to me. Should give it to all the conversations in which we've been involved, but thank you. So a room full of edgy people. It's also a room, I think, full of an enormous amount of caring. People have come here because they care about something, and they care generally about people whom they feel need help. They care about people who aren't doing well in school, who are perhaps troubled, who perhaps are into drugs, who are perhaps bored, who aren't culturally prepared to be in school, or perhaps disabled in some way, or challenged in some way, or have had trouble with mental illness, and so on. People who don't seem to fit, and therefore are on the edge. But if you stop for a moment just to think about the names that we give those people, troubled, unprepared, mentally ill, challenged, and so on, they're all kind of negative terms. It's a sort of a deficit discourse. Now that's kind of interesting. Why? Why is that? Why do we select negative terms for those people? Partly because they don't fit in something that we don't question, which is the system of education itself. As that stands okay, it's those people who need the help. That's kind of interesting. And I dare say that I think a lot of people in this room have given a lot of thought to the possibility that it's not the people who are on the edge, it's the institution that's on the edge. And maybe we ought to turn our sights back a little bit to shed some critical light and reflect a little bit on those institutions and how they could be otherwise. Now, I want to say something about those institutions, and I think a lot of us have been critical about them, and that is that caring that we share here, we come in and care about something, is roughly the same impulse and the same desire of those people who created the institutions. And that we run the risk, in what we do, of replicating the same issues, that is, of creating something out of great care that doesn't work, that seems to be injurious as opposed to helpful. So let me go back a little bit, wind back a little bit, just to consider what would lead us to create the institution of education that we largely have, which was a great concern that we take people who have very little in the way of knowledge and we try to generate a culture of people who know things, who have the knowledge to build things, to take jobs, to take responsibilities, to build the culture, to build the civil institutions, who can vote, who can create. Don't we want to do that? So what do? We have masses of people to do that with. We've got to think it out. What rationally can we possibly do? Well, we've got to have people who are trained to be educators, right? We need trained teachers. We need trained administrators. We need the best of what there is from the knowledge-generating communities of, let's say, the universities and fields of study. And we need those represented in the curriculum and presented by those teachers and given to the students in such a way that they can become knowledgeable, can become persons who know something and so on, who can take responsibilities in entering the world. That makes sense. We want to make sure that everybody does their job right, so we train teachers to do good things. They know a lot. They've had a lot of training. They know what to do. And we have the knowledge put into units so that we know what they mean and when you get them and when they're appropriate. Then we set in motion various ways in which we can be sure this is functioning really well. That is, we'll do performance evaluation, we'll do evaluation of students, we'll do evaluation of school systems, we'll get readouts of what's happening so we can keep up with it. Make sure that we're all doing our job, everyone is doing their job, and that we can make sure that the product of that system is well-educated people. Because how do we know otherwise that we're really doing anything? So there's a surveillance system and a measurement system. And that measurement system is all the better because we can link it to the economy. So now we can do cost-benefit analysis on how that system is operating. And we can try to get the most for our money, or we can demonstrate to taxpayers that indeed their money is going to something which is producing students who are competitive with the world market. Denmark, United States, Japan, China, we can be there and we can show you that we can do it for the least money. Cost effective. Now, some way all that sounds okay. But it's also, if you look at it in terms of metaphor, it's like a factory or a machine. It's a well-designed machine, rationally built from top to bottom with all sorts of inner ways of checking and balancing it so we make sure it's efficient and effective in doing what it's supposed to do. A standardizing machine, so everything should be up to snuff. It should be standardization. So what do we have? We have a community of people, enormous culture filled with all sorts of variations. Kids who come in with different talents, desires, abilities, wants, dreams, hopes, fears, potentials. It's like the machine. Put them in the hopper, work on them, and out comes, Mr. Certified Educated. Well, that machine has an edge. That machine chops. And if you don't fit into the machine, if you don't fit into its categories, if you don't fit into what it's supposed to be producing, it kicks you out like chaff, like debris, like the stuff we don't want. It's not that people drop out of education. It's like they're pushed out. They're undesirable. They don't function in the classes. I mean, attention deficit disorder is just the latest of this kind of thing. You take kids who probably hyped on electronic education, who come in, who can move across computer world like very rapidly, who can keep up with several things going on simultaneously, and put them in a classroom and there's just a lecture. Wow, that's boring. So you fidget, you can't pay attention. You know, what am I going to do? I'm going to look at something else, think of something else, play with my classmates, look out the window, anything but sit here and listen to this person talking about something I don't care about. The child who never had a problem in his or her life is now classified as attention deficit disorder. Not because the child's got a problem, the teacher's got a problem. The parents have a problem. The kid isn't doing what he should be doing. And psychiatry joins the bandwagon, and the pharmaceutical companies make enormous profits. So that in the United States, we now find 1 in 10 school children on some kind of psychotropic drug because they didn't fit. Stuff them in the machine. You're going to fit, you're going to do well. And others who drop out, who never make it, who are not cared for at all. So that's the kind of thing we're dealing with. A well-prepared, well-thought-out machine that just doesn't seem to work. And I don't think it's just the kids who drop out, who don't make it, who find themselves constantly told they're failing. Who wants to stay in a school like that? Not just them. It's even the kids who do well. Not all of them. But I think here of my granddaughter, Jenna. At the age of about 12, 13, she was a wonderfully brilliant child who had interested in enormous numbers of things. Played musical instruments, participated in theater, did well in school. I mean, just a charming, charming, wonderful child. By the age of 17, she's now in all the advanced classes in this high school. She's taking college-level work. But she's a zombie. And I asked Jenna, well, tell me, what are you interested in? Nothing. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Because all the rewards are there. I mean, you set the system in place, and then you add competition to it, and you've really got a cauldron of cutting. So cutting, that kind of dull thud of boredom that you feel, that this isn't right, this isn't interesting, I'm just sitting here wasting my time. I'm trying to pass things, but I don't really like them. Or it gets a little harder where you get continuous failure. The cutting comes a little bit sharper and you find you have to bring home a report card that's going to get you in trouble with your parents and make you look like a dummy to your peers. And it gets really bloody when you find that you can't get into college or you can't get into some job because you didn't pass the test. So how can we change that system? And what makes us think here, who come in with the same hope that we can bring caring into this and change it, what will we do that's any different? My strong hope, and I think, when we tried to talk about this conference, is there was another piece of wisdom that was functioning here that we bring, which is, look, maybe there wasn't any kind of dialogue about how we were going to set up this rational system. Maybe it was done sort of off stage by experts and people on high for everybody else, but they didn't listen to everybody else. And maybe it just might be useful if we kind of listen before we planned, or listen while we do things, that we collaborated together as opposed to imposing a system from somewhere else on an expert basis. Perhaps that's the missing piece. Now I think here, of a big attempt about 4 years ago in Newark, New Jersey, which is one of the poorest cities in the United States. Huge poverty, poor educational systems. I mean, the people don't stay in school, they don't perform well. And Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, I am going to dote $100 million. We are going to change the Newark school systems. And New Jersey, going to match that with another $100 million. So we're going to change this whole system. You know, when you think these systems don't work in impoverished areas, we're going to show you. We're going to create a model for the future. So they brought in all the experts. They spent millions of dollars on consultation. All the government figures in. They brought educators in. They made deals with the teaching union, so they upped the salaries. Colossal failure. 2 years later, it was total shambles. $180 million they spent, and nothing really changed. When they went back to ask why, they said, well, who asked the school administrators? Did we have any discussions with teachers about what they wanted? Did we ever go to the community and ask them what would be good? Did we ever talk with any students? No. Well, we tried to have some focus groups, but we didn't really look at the material. There was utterly no collaboration and a total collapse of the system. So what I think we may know better in this room, I think we bring some wisdom about collaboration with us. Now let me press that button just a little bit. Think about the whole learning process. What are we trying to do? Well, learning takes place when you care about something, when you value something. You teach because you value education, value the process of teaching. Hopefully you should value learning, but why should you value learning? What I'm pointing to is that where values come from is not just popping in the head out of nowhere. Values emerge from relationships. We co-create what it is to be valuable, what it is to do something that's worthwhile. Nobody wants to be a teacher and care for people at birth. We generate that value. Nobody cares about biology or psychology or economics at birth. We generate the value of that. So the birth of values lies within this kind of collaborative, cooperative process. If that process works, value spouts out very well. Why is it that the most watched event in the history of the world is the World Cup? How did that get to be about? It's just a game. Because it took co-creation of something that was valuable to people. So if we want kids to care about things, if we want the educational system to work well, somehow it's got to build in that process of valuing. And that process is a social process, collaborative process. Take knowledge. What's knowledge? Well, generally, we understand now that all that we take to be knowledge that we're going to present to, let's say, kids in class, is the product of people working together. That is, that too is co-created. There isn't any knowledge in itself. There's only knowledge within a community of practitioners who come to talk in a certain way about a certain thing to do something they care about. So, what is that? Was that pulled to the ground by gravity? Did it fly to the ground? Did God push it to the ground? Well, we have an answer to that, but why that answer? Why gravity? Why not God? Why not flying? Because we've come to agree within a certain set of practices that that's what we kind of want to call it, because it allows us to do some things when we do it that, call it that. The whole notion of gravity is a construction of a group of people trying to do something together. So knowledge is built with a process of cooperation or collaboration. Why not build that process into the school system? Very concept of knowledge. What is knowledge? I mean, you have a hard time when you sit down and ask yourself very carefully what knowledge is. Justified true belief, some people say it is, but who justified it? Who justified it? Why is it that if you can have great artistry in playing the piano, that doesn't count as a study in a curriculum as knowledge? But if you have a course in musical theory, that does. If you can dance really beautifully, that doesn't count as knowledge, but history of dance will. Painting, major artists, that won't count within your curriculum of studies, but the history of art, no problem. But why? a total artifact of a cultural history which counts certain things like words as knowledge, and somehow everything else we do is not knowledge, even though words are something we do just like dance. So, virtually everything in the system, schools, everything we count as knowledge that's in words, of course, that you'll find in libraries of the world where we store knowledge. Where do all those words come from? Now, none of the words I'm speaking here I made up. They're not my words. They're all words that we made up. And if we didn't agree on those words and how they function, they wouldn't be words. They wouldn't be a language. It'd be nonsense. So we kind of made up together all our ways of speaking, which is to say all our ways of articulating what is real, what is good, what is right, what is rational. All that we together have done. So where is the we together piece of education here? It's saying it's this set of relationships which can produce wonderful, wonderful things get left out of the system, and where they're the key process in the system. Without relationships which function productively, the system doesn't function productively. It's not an add-on, oh, we got to think about the relationships. That's the center core. And one might say, we get very foundational here, that you could look at my clothing as language too. You could look at my tone of voice as language. You could look at my arms as language. And where did all that come into meaning? How did I get to do that? How is that okay here? Because we already co-produced it being okay. I couldn't do that unless that was a pretty much okay thing to do here. And I could do a lot of other things with that arm right now that wouldn't be okay. So is there anything that we do at all outside of breathing that doesn't get its origins in the milieu in which we relate? Okay, with that said, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about one project that I've had the great fortune of working with Chateau Gill, who is here from the Hermes Peace Foundation. And our project has been just a piece of this, but it's about evaluation. It's about that cutting edge and how to rethink it. Because the way in which testing works, examinations and so on, the first thing you have to ask about them is, do they enhance learning? Are they really effective in really enriching the learning process? Secondly, do they do anything to enrich relationships? Go back to that. And thirdly, do they instill any kind of sustained care about learning? You know, something that goes past the classes but takes one on into the world. Do tests and exams do much to foster those ends? Now, a report card on that isn't particularly good. So you take people who learn because they're trying to pass a test. Generally speaking, 80% of what they'll learn will be gone within a year. By the time you reach 40, you will have a hard time passing 6th grade math, even though you were a stellar student at the time. Because that stuff just comes and goes. Maybe a piece of it remains. What was that capital? Where was that ocean? Something. But now you, of course, look it up in a jiffy and it's there. So memory, we don't have to instill a lot of memory. Some basic processes might do because everything is stored and available. So teaching just because you're trying to pass a test is not particularly valuable. Yeah, you can pass the test or not, but it doesn't really, in terms of learning, doesn't do much, and it certainly doesn't do much to inspire you to learn. It's a coercive form of learning. I don't really want to study this. God, it's awful, it's boring, but I have to, because if I don't pass this test, I'm going to look like a jerk, and my parents are really going to be down on me. I'll take away all my privileges for the next week. So, doesn't help learning. Does it help relationships? Classes are set up as competitions. It's an all against all world. Who's going to be on top? Who's going to go on in the establishment? So it's me against you. Fundamentally, I'm out to beat you. And so you array the whole class in some kind of hierarchy from the really good to the not good, and you've got already a cauldron of fear, anger, mistrust functioning within the class. Cliques who will gather, we're the good students, they're the bad students, we don't hang with them. Copying, cheating, worrying. Not only relationships among students, but it's the relationship between teacher and student, because ultimately you as teacher are the kind of examiner looking and not too clear about who might be cheating. So it's kind of an objectification. And I, as student, you're not really a friend. You might seem friendly, but at the end of the semester, I'm going to get this test, and it doesn't matter about our friendship. So you kind of alienated teachers and students, and you certainly alienated a lot of students from their families. First thing they want to know at the end of the day is, how'd you do? How was school? How did you do? How was your performance? I don't know about you, but I lived with 3 brothers, and my father, the mealtime, that was basically what we did. It was like a military base. You could, yes sir, we did X, Y, and Z for the day. Then you could eat after you've told a lie. So, doesn't do much for relationships. And what does it do for sustained interest in anything? I didn't take many of these subjects because I wanted to. I took them because that's a requirement. That's not a very good way of trying to instill interest. I have a grandson now who he's trying to build, he's like 11, and he's trying to build his own computer at home from scratch. I mean, the kid's really into computers, and he's very bright about that, fascinated about it, comes home and works on that project. Hates school. No, it just, the tests really bother him. So we could take 3 days off for a national test, and everything stops for them. I mean, all we do is have tests. It's just total interference in his life, what really interests him. Now, clearly all that testing and examination isn't doing much to instill interest either. Now, what is it for? What is it for? But it's not doing any of that. It's used by other people to check on the system. But it's not a check on the system. It's like any time you take a human being and you convert that human being to a number, it's an atrocity. It's like an abstraction of something that's going on, not because it's a measure of him or her, it's because you have a magnifying glass that you have designed to create that child in those terms. It's a construction of the child, not in that child's terms, not in the parent's terms, not in the teacher's terms, not in the friend's terms of that child, but it's a construction of yours that you're using to justify economics, justify I'm doing well in teaching in this school, that I am a good teacher. It's a justification. Or they're used as yardsticks to get somewhere. That if you didn't do this well, then you can't go on. It's not about teaching, it's about surveying to make sure you organize the system well. Do we have to do it that way? Do we really need those yardsticks, or is that really doing anything? Can we rethink that process? So what Chateau and I have been trying to do is not only to rethink that process, but to try to also gather collaborative, what you might call collaborative practices from all over, from any place that we can find them, to try to collect them, see if there's some unity, see if they could be shared. What are people doing that are not those things? Practices of evaluation, because yes, we do want to evaluate as we go. We want to know that things are going this way as opposed to that. How is it going? We're not arguing against evaluation, but it's evaluation that helps you learn, that helps relationships, and it inspires you to do something. And a number of you are probably familiar with these kinds of practices, and you should talk with me or should go and share them. I mean, what we think of things, like a learning review of a child in a primary school, and the child at the end of a semester presents what he or she's been doing for that semester to teacher and parents. These are the things that have interested me. This is the kind of work I've been doing that I really like. This thing I didn't do very well because I think X, Y, and Z, and I should probably improve there. This thing I'm really proud of. And you join the teacher and the parents in a conversation about all that. And not only that, how can they help you with those things that you didn't do very well on? You know, what could we do? We do. Totally different feel. Talk about self-managed learning in upper classes, where you get groups of kids together who talk about themselves for a while, really get to know each other, who talk about what they really want to do that semester, what things they really hope to accomplish. They're in the school, what would they like to do? And how would they like to do that? And they make pledges. And they meet periodically to talk about how they're doing. And if one of them has a problem, I'm trying to write this thing, and I can't quite get it done, and the other kids might join in, give some support, give some help, give some insights. So it comes a community of relationships which are interdependent. It facilitates people doing what they care about. And it develops a kind of ways of talking about learning, about how I'm doing, the learning how to learn. So that you come to eventually not to be following the prescriptions that these are the 8 steps you have to do for critical thinking. You become a critical thinker in doing it. Now, Ingeborg Malin will talk tomorrow about some other steps that they take in their school, but many of you have others. And we look at these as being like with enough movement in these directions and enough zest behind them, enough feeling of inspiration, that slowly you may be able to change the system. And once you've undone that crave to measure, the rest of the system starts to unravel too, because if you don't measure everything for some other purpose, then you're freer to teach, you're freer to listen to children in your classes, what they need, what they want, individual needs and aspirations, and the students have a much greater sense of authority over their education and a sense of camaraderie. Well, those are some of the hopes. Now, this room is filled with people who do collaborative work. I mean, in some way, the day and tomorrow are going to be like a festival of collaboration. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. So thank you very much. You have a few minutes to evaluate me. I'll open the conversation.
Thank you for your talk. I totally agree with you. But when I was young and rebellious, I wasn't very good in school. I hated teachers mostly because they bored me. And I used a lot of my time when I was young to think about how schools could be. And this sounded a bit like what you presented. And it went all the way back to the worst. So that's actually the only thing that worries me, that we don't progress in a direction where we actually work in a way which is really satisfying for children. I mean, we present a project here, my PhD student and I, where we worked in a school in Copenhagen and did some changes for a period of 2 years, but the school wasn't able to pick it up because they were filled like here with rules and reforms the teachers didn't like maybe. So that's my biggest problems, that we sit here together and we all agree probably to what you've said, but the perspective of how to be able to change things and the system in a way that it really progresses in a way which a lot of people, I mean, Deschooling Now, I have a book at home which was called Deschooling Now, which was a book of the late 60s. So there are ideas around for more than 100 years, reform pedagogy and things like this, and we go to more administration and things like this. So I'm somehow a bit desperate and I don't know how to, yeah, we can say hooray, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? What to do with the government, what to do with the regulations that are already in place. There are two things about this. One is that there are a lot of stories about schools which have challenged those regulations. I heard one last night where all the teachers got together and said, we're not doing that. That's just not what we're going to do. Now, what the regulators going to do about that? They're going to close the schools, the major schools. So they just objected. The second one is that I think there's a lot of grassroots change that's going on without, under the radar. People who are doing other kinds of things that they can get it, they can slip it in. So that my sense is there's a sea change going on anyway. And that at the top level, there's also a sense that we cannot continue to do education in this way, because what we've designed is education in a model that was like 130 years ago. And the real problem is that the world is changing so rapidly, so that what counts as knowledge and what's important to know is enormous rapid change in that. So we don't know what the jobs are going to be that we're preparing people for, because the jobs that are there now are not going to be the same. So how do we prepare? What do you really need to know? How much math do you really need to know? Maybe you need to know computers better than you need to know math or something like that. Nobody understands that. But really, the cutting edge thing is that the whole model is based on standardization. Everybody coming out with the same education. And we also understand that creativity requires deviation. It requires non-standardization. It requires people who are not fitting into one thing, because real creativity doesn't take place within a community. It takes place within cross-breeding of communities. So you just can't stay in a community. You can create something, but it's always within the confines of the assumptions of that community. So what you really need are people who can move across, or who don't have a real place, who can simply move across conversations. I mean, at my college, we have those standard majors, but most of the action now goes on in sort of sprout-ups. That is, these where people come together over visual peace, or environment, or interpretation. Or that is, they're not areas of real study, but they're hot, they're now, and if we're not talking about those things, we're in trouble. So the very idea of these controlled units of departments in buildings, with the buildings spread out over a campus, just isn't working either. So there is a sense that somehow the institution really needs to be changed, that we've got to rethink it. And I know in California, for example, they're doing a major job of saying, look, the whole education system just doesn't function well. How can we continue to redo it, based it much more on digital information processing, so that you could get classrooms that are in touch with the whole world. So the information flows of the world are flowing through our classes, so we're not here, we're everywhere. How could we do that? So the groundwork is there. Now, if we could only generate those conversations hierarchically within the culture with people who are in government, maybe, I don't want to say it's not hopeful. Why would I want to say that?
A question to what you're saying here. The systems are getting more complex, but doesn't that really make it more important actually to learn, for example, math? I mean, basic knowledge in math is needed to understand and to be critical for these complex systems. I myself had math in school, and what should I use it for? Not much, maybe, but now in my work today, it's very important to be able to read a project and understand the economics. So this is a basic knowledge to be critical and to be analytic further on in your life. So there must be some value in the process of learning, whether or not we can see a hands-on product.
Well, I like one of the part of that phrase, which maybe the emphasis should be on learning and as a process, as opposed to, let's say, the content. Because, I mean, we have this idea, it's kind of a Lockean idea of a blank slate mind, and if you sort of put things into it and stack them up, at the end you've got foundations, and you build on the foundations, and so they're stronger and stronger. When you come out, you have everything there, and you're kind of a gyroscope and can move through the world with its foundations. There's no evidence to support that kind of idea. As I said, people just forget that stuff. So the question would be then, how could you generate classes so that the process of learning was like a continuous, so I can dive into that, I can master that, I can find how I do that, not with it must be this way and anything else isn't going to work, but how could it be that way? I'll give you a case of my own, statistics, all right? I went into psychology, I had to take statistics, hated statistics. My father was a mathematician, so I'm not going to like statistics. And I would watch the teacher who would give you statistical derivations on the board, and she'd fill this board with these equations and see this, now we'll invert the matrix, and like a magician. And then you have to memorize this formula to pass the test, things like that. It was a burden to take that course. 2 years later, I'm my PhD, and I'm trying to do research, which depends on statistics. I read everything I can get, because my future depends on whether I can get a statistical difference, a probability level, and different statistics will give you different levels depending on assumptions. But you can play with the statistics to get, I mean, I hate to say this about knowledge, but you can play with the statistics and you can get out results that you need to publish, which means you can not perish. But I'm trying to say is you master the thing which you need to do at the point, and you are very interested in it because something hangs on it that you want to do. So I'd say if learning were more like that, and I think that's sort of the basis of a lot of project learning, I mean, which I really applaud. At least you you care about some kind of outcome. How can we build this town or this, how can we develop this water resource? What would it take? Well, I need some math to do that, and I need some geography to do that, and I need some politics to do that, and so on. You put it all together, because that's more like what life is like, complex problems which have no one solution, which you need multiple voices to work on, learning as they're going. Got 3 minutes. Look, I've been advocating dialogue here, and you're leaving me alone.
It doesn't? Yeah. My name is Birgitte Ravn Olesen from Dialogic Communication Studies at Roskilde University. I appreciate all you said, and at the same time I get rather frustrated. And that's because my children went to a Waldorf school because my husband and I wanted them to be a creative school where there were no tests, and very much a school, as you said, a school should be. And then after school, they went to the high school in Denmark, Gymnasium, and I told them, it's hard, it's terrible, but keep on, because after Gymnasium, high school, you will be able to go to university, and university is just like a Waldorf school. And I think I was talking about what I wanted it to be, because when they started there at university, they said, you were not right. And if I had been thinking about not my own time at university, but at the university I'm teaching at today, then unfortunately I have to say they are right. And I think we are sitting, all the people here, we are the ones who are responsible for the system which is there today at universities. And there is something, we are honoring you, we are talking about that you're right, and we are doing the exact opposite, or I don't know, I think you are doing the exact opposite, because I think you, just as me, says, I can't do anything else, it's the system, we are on pressure all the time, and what we produce are students who are not studying for the process, for the learning process, but for the result, for good marks. And it frustrates us. We can't make them read anything if they do not know what they should use it for when they are having an exam. Sorry.
Well, let's start a revolution. I mean, I'm not totally unserious about that. I mean, if you really want to move, why not start today and develop ranges of educators who are on board about this? Make that known to the policymakers. Make it, we're not happy with this situation. We need to talk. And that's the key thing. We need you to come to our schools. We need to have you here. You need to hear these kinds of, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, what I really love is that we've got some students here that are going to be part of this conversation. I thought, fantastic. This is just right for this conference. But we don't have policymakers. And that's unfortunate. We tried to invite several, but it really should have been from, you know, the whole range of interlocutors should be represented. Yeah. Wait a minute.
Okay, hello. Well, I'm one of the bad guys, Jonas, from the Ministry of Education. Hello, everyone. So I'm just, I thought, oh, do I dare to stand up? Yeah, okay, I better. Because I think in many ways I totally agree with you, Kenneth, and all of you here, what you expressed. So I just wanted to say that my role in the Ministry of Education is as a learning consultant. We are working in kind of that gap between the policymakers and the practitioners. So we are really making an effort to closing that gap. Being here today, listening to you, and doing my work in everyday practice, supporting schools and municipalities, developing more inclusive education. We're not only working one way, we're trying to bring back all these experiences from practitioners and bringing it back to the ministry. And actually sometimes the policymakers and our bosses, they ask us, what do you hear when you're out in the educational sector? What is the problems? What do we have to change? And we feed back in the system to make the policymakers aware of what are the needs and the problems out there. So.
Maybe I should say, my name is Reinhard Stelter. I'm from the University of Copenhagen. And I actually moved to Denmark at a time where there was really good schools here. And I come from Germany, and I was really happy. And that was, I met a Dane, but that was one reason I moved to Denmark, to learn something about good schools. So, but to be more productive in this way, I have actually a suggestion that this conference should come with a declaration tomorrow evening and send this to your boss. So that's, maybe if some people sit together, it shouldn't be a long declaration, maybe 20 lines or something, or 10. And we send this because, we are experts, and we should tell the administrators and the Ministry of Education what we think about schooling and how we think what the product of this conference was, and send this declaration.
Well, Reinhard, why don't you... Reinhard, you might want to talk with some of the heads of the school here and see if you could work that out. Why not? It could be a great accomplishment.
We have time for one more question, the last one.
Thank you. Well, thank you for a very nice presentation, first of all. I think that it kind of points towards a somewhat depressive picture of what educational practice and education is about today. And I think that, could it be less either or? We can have, and we have had more teaching to the test, more test in our public school. It's been increasing, but still, I think that's a huge space doing something completely different in our daily educational practices as a school here, but also in public schools. So we need to focus a bit more upon what can you do to change the way you relate to the pupils, the students at school. That's where our capacity to act lies.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a little bit what I meant about the under the radar. I do think there was a lot going on. I also hear a lot of complaints here about policies that have been in place that make it more difficult to do the things you want to do from day to day as well. So this need to continue that, accentuate that process of communicating upward, so would be really important. So.
One final question. No? Then there will be coffee out here and on the first floor. And yeah, thank you to Kenneth Gergen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.